Hello, hello, and welcome to this episode of The Creative Pause. My name is Susan Padron, and I am here with my co-host, who I will allow to introduce herself.
Hello, everyone. I'm Stacey Faye. It's good to be with you today. As we always say, we hope that this episode and this time gives you a creative pause, gives you a moment to breathe and smile in an otherwise, hectic time when we're going from quarantine into thinking about, moving out of this. It's important to take some time to just rest a little bit and get some creative juices flowing. So we're really glad to have you here. And we always start our episodes with asking how everyone's doing out there. It's important just to kind of assess where your feelings are at. And we always say, if you want to write it down or just check in with a friend today, maybe FaceTime somebody and see how they're doing and how you're doing, it can be really helpful. And so Susan and I will share, as well as Jill. And we hope that in our words, you hear some of the same things you might also be feeling. So I can get started. My day today is better than yesterday, which is good. I've had a rough couple of days, so today's a little bit calmer. I did get outside, which really helped. And I also, because today with Jill, our guest, we'll be talking a little bit about mantras, in the form of lettering art. And it got me thinking about what maybe a mantra might be for me right now, or a word that would be grounding. And I found that helpful. My word actually, I think right now, is trust. Of needing to trust myself and trust that things will work out, even if they're very uncertain right now. And so, so I don't know. I found that helpful. I kind of meditated on that word today of trust, and that helped ground me a lot. So that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Susan?
I'm doing okay. I feel like on the better side of okay than on the not great side of okay. So I don't know. I don't know if there's a number scale, like there is like a pain scale in terms of how you're doing on a scale of bad to fantastic. But if there were fantastic being a 10, bad being the 1, I'd probably be at a 6 or 7, I guess. Yeah. My day has been fine. I'm excited about this episode. I have been experimenting with lettering very infrequently, but I am just dying for some actual beautiful instruction from our guest Jill today, because I've been fanning out on her work that she's been posting on social media, so I'm excited for that. But yeah, had a good day with my son, and but yeah, nothing crazy exciting, just okay, and I'm okay with that. Jill, how are you doing?
Hi guys. Thanks for having me on. I'm okay. I liked your number scale. It's a good way to go. I'm probably at a 6 or 7 too. I feel like I have one common theme through the whole pandemic, which is I'm trying to create systems and organization. I definitely err on the side of someone who likes flexibility, and I'm married to someone who likes consistency. So I think he does a really nice job in saying school starts at 10. And I'm like, that's great. I'll figure everything else out around that. I have 2 kids. I have a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I attempted the homeschooling at first, and my anxiety skyrocketed. And I was like, I can't do this. If you need me to do it, I'll do it, but I can't. So we worked out a system where he takes my son in his office and he does work and he does school. And then I'm wrangling the 3-year-old. So that's fine for me. We usually go outside, or I'll go for a walk. I'll take her with me. She'll stay here. Honestly, a lot of the times I throw her on ABC Mouse for 30 minutes and I go for a walk. And that's how I start my day. It's the thing that, helps me to stay grounded. But it's little practices. I learned a little while ago to kind of shift my mindset from productivity to experiments. So I sort of view every day as a mini experiment. So I'm gathering information, I'm giving myself permission to try new things. And then at the end of the day, I'm, ending it with gratitude and saying, what did I learn today that I can try tomorrow? But sort of viewing the whole big thing as one big experiment. So at the end, I'm going to have a lot of best practices, but the problem will be then it'll be over and then I'll have to just start learning something new. So that's kind of how I'm doing today and then handling things in general. Yeah, they're hiding. I've warned all human beings to not come out into the living room. So one is napping, one's watching a show, and that's how you survive sometimes, doing grown-up adult work things. So
Yeah, Stacey and I think can both completely relate to that. Minutes before we were supposed to record yesterday, my son, who is 5, just like busts into my office and he's like, "Mommy, Daddy gave me soda yesterday or gave me soda earlier." And I'm like, "Great, that's okay. We'll talk about that later. Mommy's working. Can we talk about that later?" Also, ABC Mouse has been, yes, wonderful. Has saved us from so many battles in terms of like the homeschooling, just nightmare. Yeah, ABC Mouse is fantastic. And Stacey, when Julian gets a bit older, it's an app on your iPad, and it's great. It's really great. Now that we're
Well, I also love the kind of experiment piece, right? Because
Mm.
I feel like when I don't view things like that, I just, I always use the expression, I go down the rabbit hole. I go down the rabbit hole of some negative thinking. But if you view it as an experiment in this time, it's like, okay, some days the experiment's going to fail. Some days, some days the experiment's going great and you learn things from it, or you learn things either way. So yeah, I thought I really resonated with that piece of what you said for sure.
yeah, I don't even see it as failure anymore. I just see it as it's all information. The trick for me in the beginning was that everything was so productivity based, right? You moved your body to lose weight. You did this for that, that it took me a long time to shift out of seeing things as an opportunity to gather information. I was so productivity focused when I actually started making art that I quit because I bought the materials, I looked at the tutorials, and I couldn't do it. And I was like, hey, I'm out. This feels like crap. I don't want to feel like that. Being a beginner stinks, and I'm done. And so I went to therapy, and that was very helpful to shift my mindset. Really, that's what it was. And learning what I'm going to talk about today, which is this concept of permission, giving yourself permission. It's like a permission slip, a self permission slip. And gosh, during this pandemic, I'm checking in every day. What is it today that I need permission to do? Some days I need to give myself permission to try to eat cleaner and sleep better. Sometimes it's sit on the couch with ice cream. It's been a hot mess of a day. Some days it's just get out, just try to walk every morning, right? Try to make a little bit of art. It's really super small things. And that was hard for me. I wouldn't say that I was a perfectionist before, but I was a doer, right? I would say my worth was directly linked to the amount of things that I did. And so to shift out of that mentality took practice. And what's been most interesting about my art making journey was that when I came back to making art, it was almost as if I took worthiness out of the equation. So before I would sit down to make art and it was crap, and I was like, I'm no good. I suck. Other people can do this better. And through some, clearing emotional work, it was almost as if I took my worth off the table. And it was like, is the art good? Did I learn something about the art today? Oh, I liked this pen and that brush. But I was no longer asking myself, was I good enough? It was just assessing the process of making the art, which really changed things, right? It was like my worthiness was no longer up for grabs. It was non-negotiable. I chose to believe I was worthy, and that was it. And so it made the art making, it made learning new things much more enjoyable, much more open, a spirit of curiosity and learning, which is a very helpful mindset to have adopted.
Yeah, I I love so much of what you just said, and I feel like those are so many lifelong lessons that we can all apply as adults, especially. I used to teach private music lessons, and I would occasionally get adults. And as students, most of my students were younger, but occasionally I would get an adult. And their biggest thing was they were so used to just being able to do things well right away because they weren't learning new skills.
Mhm.
And so when they decided, like, yeah, I want to play an instrument, like, whatever, it doesn't matter that I'm in my like 30s, 40s, 70s, like, I want to learn a new instrument. And then they struggled with that mindset of like, what do you mean I'm not good right away? And the fact that they weren't just incredible flutists or saxophonists like right off the bat. And it's about like giving yourself permission to learn something new, to create something, and then also figure out what it is, like you were saying, even if it's just one or two things like that you did well or that you enjoyed in the process, so that you can continue to have that growth. I think that that's just a really, really fantastic approach to life as an adult, like beyond childhood, and experiencing new things and trying new things. So I want to share the quote that you shared with us, Jill. So I'm going to do a quick little screen share. I feel like it's, perfectly aligned with the conversation that we're having.
And Brene Brown's getting a lot of love on these episodes.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's the best.
Yeah. Unused creativity is not benign. It metastasizes. It turns into grief, rage, judgment, sorrow, shame. We are creative beings. We are by nature creative. Like Stacey mentions, by Brene Brown. So Jill, what drew you to this quote, aside from the fact that Brene Brown is a complete and total genius?
Well, it pretty much was her research that got me to where I am, really. So I started my therapy journey, was all focused on productivity. And then I was introduced to Brene Brown at the time. And a couple of the key things that I learned from her was that I wanted to have a more whole life experience. So I tried to figure out what that looked like. And in her book, she gives some really great examples of all of the research she had done. Here's what everybody's saying that leads to feeling this wholehearted life and experience. And you go down the list and creativity is on it. And she's so interesting. She's got a great explanation. She's like, she scoffed at it at first because she's this, at the time, a higher academic, like, oh, I have a JOB and you're going to do your ART. Isn't that cute? Like, she was above it in some way. And she said she was really humbled because the research kept showing that people who had a wholehearted life had an active creative practice. And, at the time I was 35 and I thought, I'm too old. It's too late. This is for kids. This is not for adults. I don't even know what this is going to look like. And then I just found some online classes and started really small. But like I said, I quit because I hated how it made me feel. And then she has another really important quote, I think, which talks about worthiness, in that she researched a ton and asked a bunch of people. And she separated groups of people into two groups, people who believed they were worthy and people who didn't. And both life experiences were the same, both hardships. And the only difference between the people who believed they were worthy and the people who didn't, was that the people who believed they were worthy chose to believe. It's not like they had more money or a better family. They literally just chose to believe that they were worthy. And I was like, oh, hot heck, that's going to be a journey. But that's really what kind of went into me making art again and picking the pen back up, was, okay, I'm going to choose to believe that I'm worthy. I'm going to choose to believe what this woman is saying, because unused creativity metastasizes into grief and rage and sorrow. And I thought, I am already working through enough rage and sorrow in therapy. I don't need any more. So let's start making art and get that practice going and see if I can clear out. And it did. it's kind of like one of the first things that I do when I'm feeling sad or overwhelmed is I just kind of sit down and I start making art.
That's awesome. That's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I found that during the like quarantine, I've been using art and more like visual art as a way to just help get out of my head so much more. You know, aside from like when I can get outside or meditating, whatever. But like I've been just feeling the need to create something
Yeah.
beautiful. So
The
yeah.
trap usually is that people believe they're creative or they're not creative. And I think the first step is realizing every human being is creative. It's not like some were born with it and some were not. Her research, and what I choose to believe, is that everybody is. So this is about you reconnecting with something that you've always had that maybe is dormant. And it's not always painting. It's photography, it's makeup, it's jewelry, it's a whole host of things. She has a wonderful language that talks about moving what you're learning in your head to your heart through your hands. And personally, that's sort of been my life experience, is when I'm wrestling with something, I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm feeling anxious, and I want to change how I feel about myself or what I believe. That's when I start using my hands. My girlfriend, who lives in Ambler, is a beautiful flower farmer. So she has a beautiful garden in her backyard. She creates bouquets and flowers and sells them. So it looks different for everybody, right? But I feel like my purpose now is to create art and teach art in a way that's super accessible for a beginner so that they can just start the practice, almost like an exercise practice, right? I'm just going to take 5 minutes. I'm going to draw a couple shapes today. That lady Jill told me this is going to help my mind. Okay, I'm going to trust her. Like, good. I trusted Brene. You can trust me. We're all good. It's a big circle of love. Here we go.
And we're back to Stacey's word of trust, right? Like that's
Yeah.
what she was saying at the beginning of the episode. Like trust is your mantra, right, Stacey? Like, so just trusting in Jill, trusting in Brene, trusting in ourselves.
Exactly. We all could use a whole lot of trust right now, I think, in our deeper selves and the way it can manifest creatively, for sure.
Yeah. So I know we've been having like this wonderful conversation with Jill, but I feel like it's time for me to formally introduce her to our audience today, and then hand over the episode to her. But Jill has been building her business, Jill Kane Designs, where she creates and sells art that's focused on modern hand lettering, abstract, floral, and watercolor pieces that inspire and motivate. And Jill says that she thrives when she is able to share her passion and knowledge, teaching workshops, offering private lessons, and coaching others through the creative process, which just from the conversations that we've been having with her so far, it seems like she is completely perfect for. So Jill, we're going to hand it over to you, my dear, and I'm excited. I have my paper and my pencil. I have my markers that I just found. Stacey's prepared too. We're like ready to go.
Okay, I'm gonna just
out. Yeah, we're all ready.
Yeah, I'm gonna take a minute and turn my screen. Sorry for all of the other things you may see as I'm turning.
I have crystals and stuff on my desk too. So
Yes, I got a little candle here, little crystals. So you can let me know if that seems okay for you.
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. So I did a couple of these ahead of time. And what I'd like to do is actually, I'll send you a PDF of this that you can include in the show notes that will have all of these already done for people. So it will be black and white and people can color them in as they want to with pens, markers, crayons. And so that's a good place for them to start. The other thing that they can do if they are feeling a little bit ambitious, which is always fun, is you can get a piece of watercolor paper and put one of these behind it and go up against a window during the day and like trace over it with pencil and then watercolor this if you want to. So if you want to get swankier words, you can just do the words and then do your own designs around it as a possibility. as well. And so I give myself permission. For me, is the way that I always start any kind of art experience. This is how I started my classes. And really what it is it's just taking a moment to kind of pause and taking a couple of deep breaths and sort of asking yourself, what is it that I need to hear today? What is it that I need to slow down and pay attention? As you would close your eyes and take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your mouth. What does your heart want to tell you that you're just too busy to hear? You're going to take another breath in through your nose, out through your mouth. And you're just asking yourself, what do I need to hear? Sometimes it's a word, gentle. Sometimes it's patience. Sometimes it's a longer phrase about being, like allowing more ease or allowing more health or trusting your intuition. And so what I then do is I feel like that's my word for the day. So I'll then start to make an art piece around that particular word. So I'm going to just move these to the side and get a blank piece of paper. And again, I'm a big fan of starting with the materials that you have in your space. I believed when I first started, I needed all of the swanky materials. So I bought all the swanky materials and then did all the swanky tutorials and then quit. So I think you should just use what you have where you are. And then as you build an interest, there are materials that can make your experience even more meaningful and warm. And I can also have you link to, I just created a supplies, my favorite materials list on my website that we can link to. So usually I like to start with shapes. That's how I learned, right? I was a 35-year-old woman with one kid when I started making art. And some of the things I first did was shapes. And so I have this handout I can link to as well. I try to go back to shapes that we all inherently know how to do. Everybody knows how to draw a circle and a half circle, right? So it's just putting the circles together in a way that feels a little bit more artistic. So I'll start with just you can freehand a basic circle. At your home, you can look for circle shapes. These are tape. Circle shapes are the bottom of jars or candles. And you can, trace the shapes as you want to trace shapes. Nothing's perfect here. I don't really believe in perfection. So you've got a couple things. Again, can you see that well? I don't know if you have to get any closer. This is a little wonky. It wasn't a perfect circle. So you know what? I'm just going to not make it a perfect circle. I'm just going to decide that none of mine are going to be perfect circles. And then, I could just draw other linking circles around. And what I'm doing is I'm just practicing shapes. There is something meditative in this process. I'm sure I could spout out research. I have a master's in community arts. I learned it 10 years ago, but I don't remember it now. There is a meditative clearing process that happens when you just sit down and just allow yourself to draw. What I like to do is I like to go back in and fill in my shapes. Like I'll just do lines. Sometimes I'll color in the middle of a circle. I'll do scoops, dashes, other little circles. Moon shapes. And it's just kind of giving yourself permission to allow all of it to be okay. None of this is deciding your worth and value. You don't have more value if your art is better. You don't lose value if your art is not as good as someone else's. It's all information. And it's a very unique individual journey where you are going to gather some information from this experience, right? I just did these half shapes in this circle and I do not like them. They feel a little kindergartenish to me, right? So maybe next time I won't use them. Or maybe next time I'll make them a little bit less crescenty and do that shape, right? I'll add some half circles in and then I'll do dots. So this is the simplicity of what you can do with a piece of paper and a pencil, which I think everybody has. If you have markers at home, you can begin to color in your shapes with markers and crayons. You can begin to right? There's a lot of things you can do. One of my favorite things to do is to use something called an archival pen. It's called a micron pen. But the reason I like to do this is because it allows you to draw shapes and then use another medium like a watercolor over it. So this paper that I just used was like cardstock. And I'm going to shift quickly to a like a watercolor paper. This happens to be Strathmore watercolor. It's a cute little 5x8. I feel like it does bite size well. And then so, you know, when it comes to circles here, I'm gonna, you know, you can see I'm freehanding circles. Just gonna add some with my micron pen. Sorry, I get silent when I'm making art. That's also natural for me, which is interesting, but I'm curious to see if that happens to other people. So yeah, so then I'll kind of go back through and I can add, usually at this point, what I'll do is after I've done some circles is I'll add some watercolor paint to it. Like I said, on my website, I have a list of my favorite materials that we can link to. And so I just kind of fill in the circles with various colors based on my mood. Lately, I'm kind of in this blushy mood. It's not like a full-on vibrant color. I'm just kind of muted is the best way that I'll say how I'm feeling. And so I'm just
do you find watercolors to be a difficult medium? I've always been obsessed with watercolors, but intimidated to try them.
No, not especially not like this. To me, this is like a perfect introduction to watercolor, is the shape space, because you're just using the medium to fill in the shape. And what the technique that there's a couple techniques of watercolor. The one that I just did was that I put wet watercolor on dry paper. It's kind of like a wet on dry technique. A wet on wet technique is when I wet the paper first, so that circle is wet, and then I take wet watercolor and I drop it in the circle. That's called a wet on wet technique. And that's the fun of the watercolor, in my opinion, is when it's unpredictable. Like you add the color and you don't know how it's going to settle. You don't know what it's going to do. It just kind of merges together, creates this, you know, weird coloring. I added color there. right? So there's a wet on dry technique, and then I'll just add water on the bottom, and it'll just kind of bleed down, which makes like a gradient appearance, which is also fun. Watercolor to me is like a great play medium. And that's kind of how I view art making, is just really play based. And again, information. Like I'll hold this up a little bit more. You can see right there, I'll use it in air quotes, mistake. I went outside the line, right? I don't care. I'm just choosing to let that be, okay? Right? Because that's sort of, what happens is the goal really is just to start making, just to give yourself permission to just kind of get some color on a paper. And I am thinking about my word as I'm going too. Like for me lately, I'm trying to just allow more ease. Just trying to allow more flow, not try to control a process that I have absolutely no control over right now. Right. So just kind of trying to ease into what I'm doing. So the other thing that you can do is you can draw shapes without the black part. So you can just freehand circles. So I'll add a couple free-handed circles.
Well, I love the element of no control over this in a sense, because all of us are struggling with control, right? So it's kind of a space where you can kind of like say, all right, I'm gonna actively engage in an artistic process that sort of is uncontrollable, and there's beauty in that.
Well, I learned in grad school about a concept called art is metaphor. And it's the idea that you're learning about yourself and life through the act of making art, right? So it is about paying attention to what you're trying to do on paper and seeing that does mirror the experiences that you're having as a person, right? I put down my paint, I was careful, and it went outside the line, right? Gosh, I can't even begin to tell you how many times something like that has happened in my own life, right? I sat down to do my monthly budget and a kid got sick, and all of a sudden that bill's too high, right? And so what I tell myself while I make art is exactly what I'm going to tell myself in my real life. And so in some ways, I feel like art making is this great opportunity to give yourself permission to try these new scripts out, right? This is the safest space, in my opinion, to say, even though I'm disappointed I went over the line, I choose to allow that to be okay. I choose to give myself permission that that's okay. And then what happens is you get into real life and you're like, yeah, I'm super disappointed that our grocery bill is so freaking expensive. But I choose to give myself permission that that's okay. And I saw it clearly. So I try to teach my son this, which is really interesting because I didn't grow up this way. I don't think my parents didn't know to teach me this information, right? So my son the other day was needing to make something for his art class, and he did it really quickly. And he's like, okay, I'm done. Can I go watch my show now? And I was like, okay, I'd like for you to give yourself permission to make this 5 different times. He's like, 5 times? Mom, that's so much. That's too many times. I'm like, let's just run an experiment. Let's see what happens. He goes, but this one is my favorite, Mom. I want to just choose this one. I'm like, hey, bud, let's just try, right? Let's just see what we learn from this experiment. So he goes back and he makes his 5 and he comes back and I'm like, okay, tell me, which one is your favorite? And he's like, it's not the first one, Mom. It's this 4th one. This 4th one is my favorite. And I was like, that's amazing. Imagine if you had stopped at the first one. Imagine if you didn't give yourself permission to try and make anything else. You wouldn't know. You wouldn't have learned. Like, tell me what else you learned about making these other things. So it's just beautiful to see. And then like a week and a half later, he made another project for school. And out of the blue, I hear him yell, hey, is it okay if I give myself permission to make more than one? Because I don't really like this. I think I want to try something else. I'm like, great. Yeah, I'd love for you to do that. So I was like, my job here is done. Right? Like I'm excelling at home, the homeschool life. I can that's what makes me feel like homeschool's a win, is when people make good art, not when the academic subjects are done. So yeah, I'm going to move this to the side and let this dry, and just to show you a couple examples of how I mixed pencil and watercolor. So I can easily at some point go over this piece with hand lettering. You can see here that this was a piece that I did that was a combination of drawing the circles first, watercoloring some, and then adding layers on top. And that particular day was surround yourself with love. This next piece was a little bit more of a therapy session, personally, where I felt like there was things I needed to let go of. And so I was learning, it's safe to let go. And here's some of the things I was trying to let go of: burden, worry, fear, overwhelm, guilt. And so they're all circle based. I just happened to add a square at the bottom with a couple lines, and I turned them into hot air balloons, right? So there's a variety of ways you can do this practice. This is probably one of my favorite that I did. I drew the circle first on this one, and then decided to put flowers at the end. There's something about circles right now. They feel very coronavirus-like. Anytime we see pictures of the coronavirus, it keeps showing it as a circle. And so it's like, how can I make beauty out of this shape for me? How can I show beautiful growth and life out of it? And so right at the very beginning of the pandemic, I was saying, I choose to believe that I'm safe and I'm prepared. In terms of adding lettering, I subscribed to something called FAUXLIGRAPHY, because I can't do real calligraphy. Real calligraphy is using a special pen like this, which has something called a soft brush tip on it. And real calligraphy is manipulating the tool to do a thin upstroke and a thick downstroke, and then a thin upstroke and a thick downstroke. Now, when I'm showing you that, that's not a problem. I can do that. But when it comes time for me to actually write a word, I cannot master this pen. And the reality is that it takes time. And of all the time in the world I have, I don't want to sit and do drills about upstrokes and downstrokes. It's just not where I'm at. So what I decided to do was I decided to learn how they shaped their letters, and shape the letters with a regular pen, but go back and mimic the downstroke by using a thicker pen. So it gives you the same appearance, but then you fill in the blanks, right? And you get the same look, but the technique is different. And so I have yet to ever do the correct calligraphy way on any piece of art that I make. Everything is using FAUXLIGRAPHY. And that sort of became my mission, was teaching people how to form and shape letters now, with the skills that they have now, where they are now, not after they learned some swanky tool after 5 years and then they got really good. It's like, no, start with who you are, start with where you are, do some shapes, and I can show you, let's see, turn my paper this way. Sometimes I tell people to start with their cursive writing. So that's my cursive hello. So I can go back and add the strokes, the thick downstroke to that, right? Which is fine. That's a super place to start. Start with where you are, right? But what I also teach, and I'll also, if people go to my website, jillkittendesigns.com, I have a download for a free lettering guide, which will teach them how to shape their letters differently, so it looks a little bit more like the actual hand lettering that you're seeing out there today, which is spaced much differently. and gives you more room to go in and add the downstrokes so it looks like real calligraphy. And then I go in and I just color that in. So again, my goal is, and that's not perfect. I made a mistake. I choose to learn from that. I know that using this pen in this way is not my favorite. So I have to either use a different pen or go back. So that's some of the stuff that I've learned along the way. But my goal is to really just get people making and to provide them with simple shapes and simple prompts so that they're managing their anxiety and stress through the act of making art. So I created a group called the Maker's Circle. It's a Facebook group that people can join. And every week I'm doing different shape prompts that give a little lesson with them. So the first week was circles, this past week was triangles, and just a hope to get people to start making some art. So I'd love for people to join me. If people want to reach out to me on Instagram or Facebook, whatever way they want to learn something new, I'm happy to offer help. And then I've got some resources I'll send to you that you can put with the show notes here. And then also the guide on my website that people can get as well.
Oh my gosh, Jill, that was so perfect. And so needed. I mean, oh, I loved it. I loved it so much. Anytime that, it was so funny when you started at the very beginning of your explanation and you were making circles. I got my candle to use, and I was tracing it, and I made a mistake, and I was like, oh, and I was about to erase it, and you were like, and I made an imperfect circle. So I decided that my circles are going to be imperfect circles. I was like, yay! It just, it helped me, and I'm sure it helps so many other people who are like me that find creating art to be initially intimidating because of the self-put upon perfection that we feel like we need to create. So I loved that, giving yourself permission and how you can visualize those, and again, in air quotes, mistakes, to then not only interpret it within your art, but interpreting it within your life too, is just such a beautiful message. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the visual creations that you make are just stunning. And I can watch you create and listen to your voice as a form of meditation. It was so perfect and very much well needed. So thank you. Thank you for that.
It's interesting. I think of you often as I get ready and try to style myself, because a lot of times I'll put something on and I'll be like, no. But I'm like, no, Susan wears that and she looks so good and she's so stylish. Give yourself permission to try that. So it's interesting. We're on opposite sides of an art form, right? You're in style and clothing and I'm in actual art making, but the concept is the same. The permission is the same. You're letting what is right now, it's enough. It's just letting it be enough. It can change at some point. It doesn't have to change, but we're not waiting till it changes in order for it to bring us joy and meaning. Like who we are now, the body size we are, the art skill that we have, it's all enough. And really, I find that the barrier between getting to that place is just a practice mindset. It's just like Brene says, you just choose to believe. You choose to believe that your body and your shape right now is enough, or you choose not to. And it's not like you have to get skinny to then have the evidence that your body's worthy of a different outfit. It's choice. It's just all choice now, right? So thank you for the work that you're doing as well in helping women. And I can't wait to get through the pandemic to connect with you about my style, because right now I'm wearing yoga pants on the bottom of this swanky little shirt and jacket.
Hey, there's no
Like,
shame in that when it
you
comes to
know.
Zoom style. That's totally stylist approved.
These slippers are on, and that's how we do pandemic style. So
Oh yeah, I mean, I fully admitted to that in the latest like style video that I did and how to dress for Zoom. I was like, hey, you want to know why you don't see anything like of what I'm wearing from the waist down? It's because it's like joggers, yoga pants, and slippers. Like I'd show you my slippers right now, but they are pretty sad looking, but they're on my
they're
feet.
well loved.
They are well loved.
Well loved.
Exactly. Oh my gosh, Jill, thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank
And
you for having me. I'm just so blessed that you would choose to reach out to me. I know Carrie's the person who connected us. And Stacey, I don't know if you know, but Carrie and I made jewelry together. That's how we met, was in grad school.
Oh, no, I didn't know that.
We went to the Dominican Republic to teach prostitutes how to make jewelry and study micro enterprise. And had this like transformative life experience together. And so when I knew that you made jewelry, it was like, oh, I don't do it anymore, but still using your hands to make something meaningful for other people. I love that that's what you're doing.
Oh, that's amazing. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. One of my first introductions to joy was when I lived in Costa Rica, totally like back in my early 20s. Yeah. And it's, yeah. And a lot of what you were saying too resonates with me in terms of, I make a lot of jewelry based on people's stories or my own stories. And it took me a full decade to get myself permission to do that. I think our art is always informed by life, you know? It's like you said something metaphor, art is metaphor, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that really made so much sense to me. I'm like, oh God, if 10 years ago or 15 or 20 years ago, I gave myself permission to allow my life to inform my art, you know, but our road is our road, right? And our journey to our art form, it is what it is. But yeah, no, I didn't know your jewelry connection. That's awesome.
well, thank you so much, Jill. And do you have any other final thoughts or parting words for our viewers before we conclude this episode?
Just encouragement. I mean, this is a really unique season is what I'm calling it. Just a really unique season. Nobody's ever done this before. I'm calling it the grand experiment, right? So if you can just give yourself permission to try something new, gather information, and permission to try again, use that information, I just feel like you'll have a more happier, calmer experience to this. You won't be devoid of pain and sadness and hardship. It doesn't take that away. But the guilt and pressure can be alleviated just with a simple mindset shift. And I still struggle with it. Like I am trying to have a healthier year. And I got into this pandemic and all of my old demons came back about controlling and, you know, I have to, you know, maintain this health thing and I've got to, it shifted where before it was intuitive based and it was loving based and what does my body need and permission based. And I immediately went to in my house with all the food controlling. It was like I was triggered all over again, right? So I had to connect with my people. I had to connect and slow down. And I have to do intuition setting and permission setting on a regular basis. It's to survive because it's trauma brings out fear, right? It's just your fear brain. And I think I choose to believe that everybody has an experience of a non-fear based reality. And so we have to stop intentionally and remember that and hold on to it somehow. And I feel like making things is the way to get yourself out of your head and remember the good stuff and back into your heart, which you know to be true, even though you don't feel it, and out. And so if I can help people do that, I would more than happy to be a tool on someone's journey to help encourage them in that way. So you're not alone. That's another thing. We're all together. You're not alone and you belong. So.
Well, thank you so much, Jill. You're like the Brene Brown of the art world. I love
Oh.
this. I could listen to you all day long.
I hope that you too can do the amount of therapy that I have done.
Yeah, believe me. Yeah, I'm with you there.
And come out with some of this language. So
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I'm so excited for us to link all the different materials that you've mentioned. It's really generous of you to, to share those out with the world and help people explore this. So thank you so, so much. We always end our episodes with the same line, which is from Mary Oliver poem. And it says, "What will you do with your one wild and precious life?" So thank you all so much for being with us today. And thank you, Jill, for everything you shared. We will see you on our next episode. We hope you have a really great day.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
bye.